Hey everybody, it's Katie Leibold.
And I'm Kelsey Jackson. We're your media team for Wildlife Partners.
We're here today to introduce you to episode 0 of our upcoming podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be interviewing CEO and co-founder of Wildlife Partners, Brian Gilroy.
We visit about how Wildlife Partners came to be, the stability of the industry, and some new products we're going to be rolling out here soon.
Be sure and like and follow along for more, as we're going to be releasing new episodes soon.
And stay tuned to our social media. We'll be dropping some clips from our podcast and some other great Wildlife Partners content.
Here this morning with Brian Gilroy, who's the co-founder and CEO of Wildlife Partners. And so, Brian, if somebody has never heard of Wildlife Partners before, how would you describe it to them? How would you explain what it is that we do?
Well, we're the largest breeder and broker of exotic wildlife here in the state of Texas. We have about, it's close to 11,500 acres of property where we breed animals. I don't know what the total count in terms of species is, but it's probably somewhere around 50 species. Our focus is on working with both Texas landowners as well as people that do not own real estate here in Texas. So we have a syndicated product that we sell through financial services firms that allows people that are not here in Texas or don't know much about the industry or don't have real estate or infrastructure, we give them access to get involved in the industry. Where Texas landowners are concerned, we provide consulting, we stock the animals on their property that they're wanting to buy, and then we also serve as their revenue source. We buy all the production that they produce.
How would you approach the question of, I think, a common misconception with Wildlife Partners is that we are hunting based or involved in hunting, which is not necessarily true. So how would you clarify that for people that might think that, we're a hunting operation?
When I first got into this industry in 2011, I was really driven by tax incentives. That's what got me in the door. But I didn't know that any industry existed beyond hunting. That's really all I thought this was about. I thought it was about me getting my friends and getting my kids and going out, and we would hunt the animals that we had on the ranch. It never really occurred to me that there was something else going on. And honestly, at the time, there really wasn't much going on. The primary revenue driver within the industry from, say, 1960 all the way up through 2010, it really was driven by hunting. I mean, you have commercial hunting ranches all over the place. When a landowner got to a point where they had excess animals on their property, they would either hunt them themselves or they would allow an outfitter to come out, and that outfitter would sell hunts. And that really is what the industry was. And unfortunately, that is how our industry was characterized, not just here locally within our state, but also nationally and internationally. So when people heard about, let's just say, for example, a scimitar oryx in Texas, they immediately associate that with canned hunting. That was the immediate affiliation, with our industry. And that didn't really help us. We weren't winning a lot of friends and influencing many people. And so
Right.
There was also a significant limitation on capital that was coming into the industry. It was really limited to people that were focused on wanting to go out and hunt. It wasn't focused on being a profitable revenue driver for a piece of property. It really wasn't that. And so what I identified was that the bulk of the people that were in this industry, they were the silent voices that weren't out speaking. They weren't giving a story to the newspaper. They weren't marketing anything on Facebook, or they weren't trying to sell hunts. They were just landowners that had somehow gotten involved in buying animals because they thought they were cool. And they had them on their property. And the people that they were doing business with, that they were buying animals from, they weren't necessarily the most professional. I don't even know that we can call them organizations. They were just brokers. They were buying and selling animals. And it was in most cases, what I discovered with these people that weren't kind of on the radar is that they had had a pretty poor experience. Either they bought animals that died shortly after buying them, or what they bought wasn't exactly as it was represented, or when they tried to sell something to someone, the transaction just didn't work out. The little zebra that was born that their wife fell in love with, that grew up, when it came time to sell it, they threw a net on it and broke its neck, and it was kind of a disaster. And so this is kind of the silent majority that I found existed, that they were not involved in the hunting industry. They were not trying to generate revenue. They weren't even getting tax benefits. They were just buying animals because they love them, because they like them. That's why they did it. And so I focused on marketing to that group of people. And what I discovered is that there were far more people that were interested in buying animals for the sole purpose of enjoying them than there were people that were interested in shooting them. Now, I'm a hunter. I mean, you can look around in here, and I hunt, and I'm pro hunting. I'm a supporter of Safari Club International and Dallas Safari Club and Houston Safari Club. And I've hunted all over the place, and I love to hunt. But I recognized early on that if I was going to build a business, a scalable business, one that actually has employees and assets and all the things associated with building a business, that I was not going to be able to do that through the hunting industry. The audience within that industry is so narrow, and the competitive environment within our state is so significant, that while I might be able to go out and generate $3 or $4 or $5 or $7 million a year of revenue, the profit margin on that's very narrow, number one. And number two, that's not really a significant business. And so going back to your question about Wildlife Partners and whether we're affiliated or unaffiliated or are or not part of the hunting industry, our model is really geared towards using exotic wildlife to capture the maximum level of tax benefits that are available to landowners, and generating revenue not through shooting an animal, but through selling that animal live to someone else when it's young. Most of the animals we're selling are a year old to 2 years old. They're not large trophy quality animals. It's not to say we don't do that occasionally, but our model is about selling young breeding population animals to landowners that are looking to capture tax incentives and to generate revenue for their ranches. So while the hunting business has its place, and there's some really great ranches out there where you can go do that, it's just really not something that we focused on, and it's not the place where we felt was the best investment of our resources. And the great news is we have no competition. The hunting industry is highly competitive. It's
people everywhere around. Yeah.
There are outfitters, there are landowners, there are ranches that, they're not in the business, but they periodically sell hunts. There are large commercial hunting ranches. I mean, it's a, add in the wedding venue business to that, and it's just, it's not saturated. It's just not where we want to be. Now, there are people that are buying and selling and brokering animals, but there's no one like us. There's no one that is using this as a mechanism for helping landowners capture tax incentives and produce revenue on their personal properties, nor is there anyone else allowing non-landowners to get involved in the industry. So while we love the hunting industry and we love to hunt, it's just not that's not where we're focused.
Yeah. If I'm a landowner, let's say, and I'm interested in getting started, can you give us like a brief breakdown on just maybe kind of like an ABC of the early process and what that looks like and how I reap the tax benefits from my property?
Sure. It has always amazed me how really sophisticated, really smart, professional people that own businesses throughout the country, and even particularly throughout the state, they don't really understand tax, and they don't really understand how tax deductions work. They don't really understand what's going on their ranch. And they have this property where they love to go, they take their family, they spend Thanksgiving, maybe they have a wedding there for their daughter, and they hunt and fish and ride four-wheelers and do all the fun things that go along with having a ranch. But they're doing all of that with after-tax money. So they have let's just say, for example, a construction company, and in the construction company, they make $5 million a year. Well, they have to pay tax on that $5 million, and that leaves, let's just say, 3.2 or $3.5 million left over. So they take the 3.5 and they go and spend that on improving the ranch and making the ranch better. But while they're making the ranch better, they're doing it with money that's already been taxed. And so when you're in the exotic wildlife business, you get a completely different tax treatment. So for someone that's just getting started, the first question would be, are you paying a lot of tax? Do you have a reason to structure your property in the manner in which that we help people get set up? So if you're paying a lot of tax, then this is probably a great pathway for you to take in order to reduce tax liability, because the income that you're making in your construction company, so to speak, it can be reduced from a deduction standpoint with expenses that you incur at your ranch. So they can actually offset that income. So if someone is just first getting started in this and they don't have any animals, they have a ranch and it's high fenced. We'll just say they've already got the blank slate. So they've got a high fence ranch. So they're ready to get started. There's a level of risk tolerance that someone has to be able to digest before they start spending significant capital. So, there is a gateway drug, so to speak, in the exotic wildlife industry. I always use that terminology. It's black buck, axis deer. At one time it was fallow deer, but they've gotten pretty expensive. Scimitar oryx, aoudad, maybe there's some sheep and things like that that are out there that people can buy. And the reason these are kind of the gateway drugs is they're inexpensive. You can buy axis does for $800 or $1,000 and black buck for about the same. And, you can get young males for a few $100s and then let them grow out. So the entry level animal are these, what they refer to as commons. And so once someone gets started buying those animals and they put them out on their ranch, they see them do well, they see them grow, and they see them have babies, and they convince themselves, I can actually keep these things alive, even through the winter. Yeah, like I can do that. The tolerance level for spending a little bit more money becomes more digestible. It's, if you think about a sable, for example, you're going to spend $50,000 plus for a female. A male is, a nice male is going to cost you $8,000 to $15,000. So if that is your entry point starting out, well, then you have to be prepared to lose that kind of money, because you're walking into this with no experience. While I understand that the risk is not that great. I mean, animals do die, but with proper management, they do quite well and they thrive. And this is not hard to do. You have to get started at some level. So that's where most people start. The other thing is you have to consider where your ranch is. If you're in East Texas, you probably don't want to put desert species on your ranch. If you're in South Texas, you probably don't want to put jungle species on your ranch. So, where your ranch is plays a role in what you're doing. Also, the size of the property that you own. If you have 10 acres, I mean, you really don't have a lot of space, but it doesn't mean you can't participate. It just means you're limited with what you can do. If you have 10,000 acres, you have a much broader platform to work with. And so you have a lot more options in terms of how you can stock your property and what you can do with it. The other question is that how much tax are you trying to offset? If you're making $200,000 a year, the amount of investment that you can make into this is very limited. If you're making $50 million a year, then you're in a completely different arena. Yeah. So your ability to start is very different. Everything is relative. One buyer starts in one place and another buyer starts in another. But it really comes down to understanding your property, understanding what animals are going to do well on your property, but also understanding your individual risk tolerance and your particular tax situation. So those are all things that we can help with. We can give great advice and great guidance on all of those subjects. There's lots of people that can give great advice around animal management and what would work well on your property. I don't know that there's really anybody that's more qualified to give the tax direction that we're able to provide. We have found that most CPAs are really not even well versed in this. They don't really have a good handle on how to structure these things. And as the result, people that have been doing this for a long time have not even been getting their tax benefits. So I think that's what we kind of bring to the table that's a unique a unique offering is that we can provide all of these areas of consulting, but specifically we can really help you at the financial side.
Going back to what you said earlier, that we're also one of the only places where people, non-landowners, can access the industry. Do you want to explain a little bit how that side of the business works? If I'm coming in as a non-landowner and I have a substantial tax burden, kind of
Sure.
how that works.
Yeah, so what Wildlife Partners started as is that that's all we planned on doing. We were strictly going to assist non-landowners with being able to invest in the exotic wildlife industry. And there's a motivation to that. So essentially what Wildlife Partners is, and this is I think what there's so many misconceptions within the industry about what our company really is. But really
Yeah.
what we are is we're a real estate company. So we have used exotic wildlife as a vehicle to acquire real estate. We started out with 270 acres. Today we have almost 11,500 acres that we own. We lease another 2,800 acres. So collectively it's more than 13,000 acres. But what we're doing is we are taking animals and we're putting them into an LLC. We're structuring them as a partnership, so to speak. And individual investors can buy interest in this LLC. And what they own is they own animals. They don't own anything else. They just own animals. So if you are part of an LLC and that LLC owns, let's just say 400 animals, well, you have to have somewhere to put them. And if you don't own real estate, well, you can't put them at the YMCA. You can't
put them in your high-rise
you
in
can't
New
just
York.
turn them loose.
Yeah.
You have to have somewhere to put them, and that's where Wildlife Partners comes in. We provide the rental property. So we're essentially a VRBO for exotic wildlife. We will allocate somewhere between 400 and 600 acres of real estate for this particular LLC. And all of those animals that are within that LLC, they live on that piece of property. So they're separated from everybody else. And so we collect rent for allowing those animals to live there. So as those animals live there, the investors that buy in on the front side, they're getting the same tax deductions that a landowner here in the state of Texas is getting when they buy animals. They are 100% tax deductible under Section 179 of the tax code. They're treated as business equipment, just like a tractor or a trailer or a printing press or a truck or any other equipment that a business may buy, a radiology, an x-ray machine. These are all the same thing as a kudu when it comes to the tax code. So these investors are getting a tax write-off on the front end, which gives them an immediate benefit from the IRS by reducing their tax bill. But as those animals live on the ranch and have babies, we sell those babies. And so we are the company that buys them. So we buy all the production that they produce. So as their animals have babies, we buy them from them at wholesale, and then we go and mark those animals up and we sell them at retail. And so those investors generate revenue to their partnership, and in turn they pay us rent.
So they're getting a tax break and a revenue stream.
That's correct.
Right.
Yes, that's exactly right.
One of the elements I really like about working here and how the company works is the quantity of endangered species that we have and house, and kind of what that's looking like for those species globally. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And just it's kind of a cool element.
Yeah, I find this subject to be very interesting. Apart from what Wildlife Partners does, or even the exotic wildlife industry, I find the sensationalism associated with certain species and the impact that it has on kind of our society here in the United States to be a little bit irrational. And what I mean by that is when you think about a rhino, or even for that matter, an elephant, the southern white rhino is not endangered. So it's not an endangered species. And it's not to say that those animals are not threatened, because they are. And it's not to say they're not the subject of poaching, because they are. But they've gotten so much attention and there's so much notoriety associated with that particular species. There's so much capital and there's so many people that are involved in trying to save these animals from the threat that they're dealing with, which is poaching. And so are those species ever going to go endangered? It's highly unlikely that a southern white rhino will ever be endangered. It's possible their species is in decline, but there's so many people that are invested in making sure that that particular species does well. And there's, I don't know, tens of thousands of them. When you look at African elephants, there's, I think it's hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, no, there's a lot.
Yeah, there's no shortage of these animals. There's lots of them. But because, we have this emotional connection to these particular species, we have this feeling that they're just in dire need of our saving. And the truth is there's so many species that need us way more than those species. And to highlight those, if you look at a Dama gazelle, there are maybe, this is a guess, I just went to a symposium on this species recently, there might be 100 of them in the wild. Maybe. They don't actually know because it's really difficult to count them because of the political environment in some of these areas. So maybe there's 100 of them in the wild. There's maybe 2,500 of them on Earth total. Well, Wildlife Partners has about 200 of them. So, we have, what is that, 8% of the global population.
Yeah, pretty significant.
Well, and we're buying more all the time. So
they're having more constantly.
Yeah, so, and we're selling more. We sell plenty of offspring to other landowners, but because we're always buying more and we're building on our herds, it is reasonable to say that within 3 years or 4 years, we could have 20% of the global population of Dama gazelles under our management. And why? Why is that happening? We're not a nonprofit organization. We're not going out and asking for donations. We're not going and pleading with people with bleeding hearts. We're not doing any of that. What we're doing is we're saying, if you buy and breed Dama gazelles and put them on your ranch, you get a tax write-off, and guess what? You can sell the offspring and make a lot of money. So you have this species that is critically endangered. It's on the verge of extinction. It's far more endangered than a rhino. And because of its economic value, landowners are pouring capital in to preserving it and saving it. And today we have enough animals where we could easily deploy those back into their native habitat, and the populations can be restored in the wild once the problems in those places get fixed. Until those problems are fixed of poaching and dogs and human encroachment and all those things, it doesn't make any sense to go and repopulate. In fact, they're catching the remaining animals out of those areas and moving them instead of hoping for the best. And so, Dama gazelles are one. My personal favorite is the Grevy zebra. There's about 3,000 Grevy zebras in the world. I don't know what we have. We have 50 or 60 of them, something like that. Mountain bongo. There's a couple different species of bongo. We like all Texas landowners, the bongo we have are mountain bongo. They're from Kenya. There's fewer than 100 of these left in the wild. And I don't know how many we have. It's close to 100, I would think, 80 or somewhere around that. I don't know what the number is, but it's the regulatory environment is detrimental to species like gaur and bantang, Arabian oryx. Arabian oryx are still listed as endangered under the Endangered Species Act. They're not endangered. The IUCN has changed them from endangered to threatened. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of these animals now, but they're still listed as endangered. So the short version of the story is that if you want to go donate your money to a nonprofit that's going to work on saving elephants and saving rhinos, that's awesome. Great. Fantastic. There's lots of places you can go do that. They serve a benefit. The zoos really enjoy using those species as leverage for why you should give the money to the zoo. Or if you want to really do something and save species that are actually critically endangered.
Actually need saving.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to downplay the risk of demise with regards to a rhino or an elephant. They have problems. People poach them. Yeah. So we need to look after them just like we need to look after all things. Real estate, we need more real estate protected. Like that's, human encroachment is a significant problem. So I don't want to minimize that. But what I'm trying to say is that if you want to donate money to a cause and feel good about yourself and get a tax write-off, go for it. Like, it's great.
Yeah.
Like, it serves a purpose. It needs to be done. There's places that are good at it. But if what you want to do is you want to get a tax deduction that gives you more benefit from a tax standpoint, and simultaneously you want to make money, you want to generate cash flow, buy animals that are critically endangered, that have a marketplace where there's commerce, where you can actually take these animals and buy and sell and trade them, and you can breed them for the future, and you can grow the populations. Like, there's recently been imports of rhinos from Namibia. These are CITES 1 animals. They have no commercial value, zero. But people are doing it because they're cool and they're iconic and they're awesome and they're neat. But it's like, if you want to do that, go spend a couple $1 billion and bring in some rhinos, and you can look at them and you can pet them and you can tell everybody you've got rhinos, and you can be cool. Like, you can do that. There's no economic value. But Dama gazelles, I'll say Arabian oryx, bongo, Grevy zebras, gaur, bantang. There's a long list of species that they are critically endangered. They do need preservation, and you can make money breeding them. And then there's those species that are not able to have commercial value. Gaur and bantang is an example. There's federal regulation that prevents us from being able to hunt them, prevents us from being able to sell them across state lines. And if those regulations would go away, you would see more people investing in them, because very few people have them. I mean, there's just not very many of them out there. So it is a really cool part of our business. It's a cool part of the industry in general. But again, it is all driven by a capitalistic model that enables landowners to make money and capture tax incentives.
Yeah.
And you'll hear me say that a lot.
Yeah.
It really is the reason our company has been successful. It's the reason that I have a platform. It's the reason that I've been able to go and speak publicly, is because we have come up with a very unique model that enables people to capture tax incentives and generate revenue by doing something that's super fun and it's meaningful.
Something that I thought was interesting too is the fact that you talked about all the improvements to your property too, things that people are already going to do, and then that's in turn tax write-offs as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you have a piece of property that you and your family go out and you have a great time at, and it's not a business, if you build a road, it's after tax money. If you put a water well in, it's after tax money. All of that is after tax. So that's 37.5% that you're giving away before you go and do these improvements. Whereas if you have a breeding operation on your property, well, all of those things are for the benefit of the breeding operation. I mean, you need good roads, because otherwise you break your back driving around checking on the animals. You need a good pond so the animals have something to drink out of. And you need a new water well so you can fill the pond up. And so these are all improvements that you're making to your real estate that you will benefit from when you sell the property, but you're going to get to do all of that as a tax deductible item. It's going to offset your income. Like
things you might already be doing anyway, and now you can write them off.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's not a limit to that. I mean, it's fences, it's barns, it's roads, it's, if you have a website, your Can-Am, all the feed that you're putting out, if you've got a ranch manager, all your feeders, like literally everything that you're already doing that you're not getting any tax benefit from, all of these things become tax deductible once you have a breeding operation on your property. And on that note, one of the things that people always ask about is they talk about the IRS requiring you to make a profit. Like they say that. And that isn't exactly what you have to do. You have to have a for-profit motive. You don't actually have to generate a profit and pay tax. And so there's it's not an art, it's just basic business. If you go out and you buy, let's say, for example, 10 kudu female, okay? And you take a tax deduction because you have those 10 female kudu, and then you take a tax deduction for your feeders and your roads and your buggies and your ranch managers and all these things, and you end up with $500,000 of tax deductions as the result of this, okay? Well, at what point do you have to have revenue? And the answer is you don't, as long as you're maintaining records. So those kudu have babies, no different than a stock splitting. And the IRS cannot force you to sell your stock and make you pay a capital gains tax. They cannot do that. So as long as you're keeping records of the babies that are being born every year, and you're putting those onto a balance sheet, and you're recording the growth in your asset base and your financials, and you're showing that the value of this entity that you have is going up in value as the result of a growing population, it's no different than a stock splitting in the stock market. If you go out and buy Microsoft and the stock splits 10 times over a period of 10 years, the IRS cannot force you to sell that stock in order to justify that you have a business. They can't make you do that. This is a capital asset that you have the right to hold indefinitely for as long as you want. And so when it comes down to capturing these tax incentives, what is the most important part of this is record keeping. You have to keep good records. Make sure that you're documenting everything you're doing. Make sure that you have a business plan in place so that you can actually demonstrate that this is in fact a business. It's not a hobby, it's a business, and you're treating it as a business because you're doing all the appropriate record keeping. And if you do that, you don't run into problems with the IRS.
Earlier, you had mentioned conservation of land as well as conservation of animals. And I know we have a new product that's launching or in the process of launching that has to do with conservation easements. Do you want to touch on that subject?
Sure. So as part of our journey in our business, we initially, these investment programs that I was talking about, we sold them internally. My brother and I, we sold them to friends and family and people that we knew, existing relationships that we had. And in 2019, we decided we were going to branch out into the financial services community, and that we were going to market our product to broker dealers, which were going to allow these firms to now start selling our product. So we went to these various symposiums and these events where financial services firms come together and companies that offer alternative investments come together. So like real estate investment trust and hotel investments and all these different kinds of investment products that maybe you don't see at your traditional broker, but they're available kind of behind the scenes to wealthy clientele. And one of the products that they had at these in 2019 were what were referred to as syndicated conservation easements. And these were investment vehicles that people were using to get tax write-offs immediately through conservation of land. And there was a lot of bad press. I mean, lots of bad press about them. And the primary reason is that you had firms, promoters, that were taking a piece of real estate that may or may not have had any conservation value at all. In other words, no one was ever going to develop the property anyways because it's in the middle of nowhere in the marsh on the coast, and nobody was ever going to build any condominiums there. So it's like going and prohibiting development of the real estate wasn't necessary because nobody was ever going to build there anyways. Right. So they were conserving land that wasn't really in any immediate threat of development. There wasn't really a risk of any development showing up. But in addition to conserving land that didn't really have conservation value, they were also using appraisal values that were very aggressive. And they were coming up with these concepts on how to value the property that didn't really
track.
Well, they were just aggressive. Let's just put it that way. And so you had the land community. When I say the land community, there's land trust all over the United States. And these land trusts, they are focused on going out and achieving a goal of what's referred to as 30 and 30. President Biden in 2019 signed an executive order. And essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to put 30% of land in America under conservation easement by 2030. I think that's 400 million acres of land. I mean, it's a huge amount of land. It's a lot of land, right?
Yeah, that seems like an aggressive goal.
Well, it is. It's a great goal. I mean, it's a really great goal when you look at the expansion of population, and you look at industry, and you look at our footprint as a species. We're everywhere you look. You go to the beach in Alaska and there's trash on it.
I mean, that's why there's all these animals in cities, is because cities are starting to encroach out.
Yeah, so we're there's this thought around preserving land, and so these groups that do this as a passion project that are nonprofit organizations, they are out looking for people to make donations, and they're looking for people to participate in the process of doing this. And there was great fear that these tax incentives would get taken away because of the abuse that was happening in the syndicated world. So they lobbied to get Congress to change some of the rules around conservation easements, specifically around syndicated conservation easements. And the IRS pitched a fit around the way that these deductions were being taken for a long time, but they really weren't gaining any traction because they're not legislators, they're just the IRS. And so ultimately, we decided in 2019, 2020 that it was in our best interest to really not go down the road of participating in these things, even though they were very appealing, because of the potential regulation that was coming down the road. But once that happened in 2022, Congress essentially said that if you're a syndicated deal, meaning that there's more than one person, there's two people or more in the deal, then you're what's referred to as syndicated. And if that's the case, the maximum deduction that you can take when you put an easement on your property is 2.5 times what you pay for it, if you do it in the first 3 years. So all these deals that were being sold, they were making these donations in the first 6 months, like 9 months. They were doing it inside of a year. So when they put this time frame of 3 years on, it evaporated that whole industry overnight. This was a multi-billion-dollar industry. I mean, billions of dollars a year were being invested into these syndicated conservation easements, and literally overnight they disappeared, like gone, poof. So there's this huge vacuum for all of this money that was going into land preservation that disappeared, just gone. And so the land trust community got what they were after. They got rid of what they viewed as the threat to the tax deductions, but they still have this goal of 30 and 30 that has to be hit. So what we did is we came up with this, what we feel is a novel idea. We already have a business operating on the real estate because we're breeding exotic wildlife. So we have the ability to cash flow the investment for that 3-year term. So if investors invest in a partnership with us, as an example, we just recently put a $45 million offering on the street. And that offering is going to own 1,440 acres of real estate that's on a river in Kerr County. So it's an immediate threat of development. There's developments going up around us all over the place. In addition to that, it's on a waterway. It's a historic property because of the Native American camps that are on it. So it has real conservation value. But because it's in the threat of development, there's significant potential value that could be captured if it were developed. If we were to build a neighborhood versus leaving it as a cool ranch, we could end up making a lot of money in doing that. And so what we did is we bought this real estate into this investment vehicle, and then we're going to put about $10 million of animals on that property. So between the time the deal is funded and 3 years down the road, we will send out distributions to all of those investors that are in that for the animals that are breeding there. So they'll get cash flow throughout this whole period of time. And at the end of a 3-year term, we're going to take a vote. And the vote will be, do you guys want to go build a neighborhood, or do you want to put a conservation easement on the property? And if we build a neighborhood, well, then we're going to build a neighborhood. That's what we'll do. The flip side to that is if they say, no, let's not build a neighborhood, let's put an easement on it, those investors will then get a tax deduction that is equal to the highest and best use value of the property at that time. And so what this does is that our model is focused on properties between Austin and Kerrville that are on waterways. So on the Guadalupe River, on the Comal River, on the Llano River, on the Pedernales River, any property that has river access between Austin and Kerrville, it is safe to say those properties are in the threat of development.
Yeah.
And so we've created a new product that's being sold through broker dealers. It is syndicated. And our goal is to do somewhere between $50 and $100 million a year in projects where we're not only breeding rare animals, but we're also potentially going to preserve really important land. And so this is the first product in the market. There are no others. We're the only ones doing it. But in addition to that, we've created a consulting company that's geared towards helping landowners here in the state that own a piece of real estate that don't necessarily know how to navigate the tax environment of putting a conservation easement on their property. They don't really know the ins and outs of how to maximize the value. They don't know if they can actually even use the tax incentives If they can't use the tax incentives, can they bring a partner in? So we've created a consulting company that assists landowners with doing this. And we're actually in the process of building relationships with land trusts in order to get these land trusts to give us their quote unquote problem child. There's landowners out there that own land and it needs to be conserved, but they don't want to do it because there's no financial incentive to do so because they have no income. So getting a tax deduction doesn't help them. But if we can help them get paid for the development rights of their property while they still own the real estate, that provides a huge benefit to all these land trusts out there that have these people that they just can't quite get over the fence. And so we have a consulting company that's helping with that as well.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really cool. I'm excited to learn more about that. And
it's really, I think the part of this that's exciting for me is that my personality is not built for the nonprofit world. I'm not built for that, and I'm a capitalist. But I just think it's great that the tax code has given us these methods where we can use the benefits that are created by Congress to go do things that are really good. We can save species that are really rare. We can preserve land that needs to be preserved, and we can get paid while we're doing it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not good at begging and pleading with people to donate money. That's not my skill set.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm passionate enough to get people to feel bad enough to just give me money for no reason. And so, but what I am pretty good at is I'm pretty good at showing people how to make money using assets and capturing the benefits that are available in the tax code. And so that's really what our business is. Our business from top to bottom is we are using capitalism and we are using tax legislation to not just help our company, but also to help others. And the byproduct of that, my motive is to make money. That's the motive. Okay. While it may sound like I'm altruistic, I'm really not. Like our motive is to make money. We're capitalists first. And, but the byproduct of it is that we preserve land and we save animals. It's kind of like when you look at hunting, a lot of people talk about hunting means conservation. And I get that. Personally, for me, I hunt because it brings this just primal, like I have my fist clenched because I feel aggressive. Like, like I turn into a caveman, and it's like I start trying to think how it is that I'm going to outsmart the animal, and I get this adrenaline rush, and I want to go climb the mountain, and I want to get war paint on my face, and I'm hunting because I have this instinct within me to go get it and to go capture it and kill it and eat it. And if the side benefit of that is that my money goes towards conservation causes in Africa or Alaska or wherever else, then great. Like that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm personally not a conservationist because I'm a hunter. I'm a hunter because I have this instinct within me to go get it. And the byproduct is conservation. It's kind of like in our industry with what we do, I'm a capitalist, but the byproduct is that we're saving species and we're protecting land.
Yeah.
So
double win.
It's a win-win for all of us.
Yeah.
So I don't ever want to give anybody this idea that, our company is, some altruistic nonprofit. We're out for the greater good of everybody, and we're these bleeding heart people. That isn't who we are. We are conservative, hardworking, capitalistic, freedom-loving, gun-holding people that found a way to use something that's really cool and really great for the greater good to make money on.
Yeah, that's on a side note to that being capitalistic. I think a lot of the common question that comes up is people wonder as far as the industry and the market and value of these animals.
I love this question.
And, you often find people comparing it to the whole ostrich thing from the 80s. And they're like, how is this different from the ostriches? And, where has the market come from? Where's the market going? and what's that stability look like there?
Yeah, it's funny. I've heard the word Ponzi, pyramid, scam, all of these things associated with what our business model is. And I would say most, if not all of it, has gone away. The first few years we heard that a lot.
I mean, heck, when I started working here, I was like, Katie, is this?
Yeah.
I mean, even working here, I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is so amazing.
Yeah, we heard those things a lot from naysayers, and we heard those things a lot from people that don't understand tax and don't understand business, and they didn't come up with this idea, So instead of embracing it, they were skeptical, And then as the market started to explode, I mean, because that's what happened. Wildlife Partners was started in 2016. The market exploded. We did all this educational stuff around tax and these days of education that we do and all these things. And the market exploded and lots and lots and lots of people got involved. And suddenly it went from, oh, that's a pyramid Ponzi scam to, well, my God, it's so good. When is it going to collapse? When is it going to fall apart? Like, this must be like ostriches, or it must be like, emus or something like that. And there's a lot, there's a lot of differences. There's some similarities and there's some differences. And I'll talk about those in part. When you look at the ostrich and the emu business, this was all driven by the idea that people were going to eat them, right? And that we were going to use their oil and we were going to use their feathers. And guess what? You can't go and eat ostrich anywhere. Like there's no ostrich burgers. About the full extent of it is you can get some Lou Casey boots or a belt or a wallet.
Yeah, like a purse.
Yeah, but nobody is eating ostrich. Nobody is using the oil. I don't think anybody's frying turkey this Thanksgiving with ostrich oil. I don't think any of that's happening. And so the model of the emu and the ostrich business that was built around consumption being people were going to eat them and use them and harvest them. When you don't have consumption, your market eventually ends up becoming saturated because all you have is breeders that are swapping amongst one another. And then when they figure out they have no economic value because there's no more breeders to buy them, well, what do? Well, you open the gate and you turn them out. You just get rid of them, you let them go. And so that is the case with the ostrich and the emu market, is that there was no consumption. There's another part of this that I think people fail to take into consideration, and it is that if you look at two industries, one of them is the gambling industry and the other one is the oil and gas industry, which I think they're both the same actually. So if you look at, let's just say Vegas, okay, when are people going to stop going to Vegas because they figured out that you lose money?
They're not.
Right. So why are they going? Why do people go to Vegas?
Because of that gamble, that chance that they might. What if I might hit it today?
Yeah, there's this euphoric feeling associated with the potential, right? But there's another reason they do it. What are the other reasons they do it? It's fun.
Yeah, it's for fun.
It's fun. It's entertainment. Like you allocate a certain amount of money to going to Las Vegas, knowing that you're probably not going to come home with the money. And as the result of it, they keep building more casinos and more casinos and more casinos and more casinos. And they're talking about making it legal in Texas. And, you've got reservations all over the country where there's more casinos. And so it's like, okay, well, where does the casino business get saturated? And I don't know. As long as people want to have fun on gambling, they're going to go and gamble. That's what they're going to do. So what are they selling? They're selling fun. So the consumption in the casino industry is fun. It's the fun is what I'm buying. I'm buying to go have fun. And I'm accepting of the fact that my $10,000 is going to be gone, but I'm exchanging my $10,000 for fun. That's what I'm exchanging it for, right? And so when you look at the oil and gas industry, it is well known that if you go out and you buy working interest in oil and gas wells, there's a high likelihood you're going to lose your money. Like, I have a lot of experience in this area, actually. And so it is well known that that's the case. So why do people do it? And there's two reasons. One of them is that when you invest in oil and gas, it's tax deductible. you're able to write off all your intangible drilling costs. So you get this huge tax deduction on the front side, no matter what happens, whether it works or whether it doesn't. But there's another part of the oil and gas industry that people don't take into consideration, and it's the country club. It's when you're hanging out with your friends and you tell them, oh, I got this oil well down there in South Texas, and it's a barn burner. It came on at 500 barrels a day. And there's bragging rights that are associated with making these investments. And there's nothing gets old about telling your buddies about your oil well that just came on a week before in South Texas. And so there's this J.R. Ewing sex appeal that goes along with investing in oil and gas. And so when you take these things into consideration, when you take in fun, bragging rights, and tax incentives, and this potential that you're going to win, and you lay that on top of the exotic wildlife industry, you marry it, okay? Is it fun to have kudu and sable and bongo and Nile lechwe and eland running around your ranch?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
It's super cool.
Exactly.
And as you're driving in on your ranch with your friends,
So like, holy
and
cow.
they see springbok bouncing around and they see these animals, do you really not feel proud? Like, are you
Seriously,
bragging
yeah.
any? Like, do you have any pictures in your office of the animals? Like, there's a bragging right associated with this. And at the end of the year, when you do your taxes and you see that this has saved you $1 million on your tax bill, but you still have all the animals there and they're out there having babies,
Talk about freaking
and
bragging rights.
and you're selling those offspring. It's like, when do you quit doing this? Next
Yeah.
year, you make $5 million again. So what do you do next year? Do you buy more animals or do you just give the IRS the money? And so as long as there is a tax incentive that is associated with buying exotic wildlife that allows us to improve our real estate, have fun, make some cash flow if we want to make cash flow, brag to our friends, and we save a whole bunch of money on our taxes, there's nothing to stop people from doing this. And as every year goes by and they end up in a situation where they've got a tax problem, their choice is, do I pay the IRS or do I go buy something? Do I improve my real estate? Do I buy more animals? I mean, it's like, who wants to buy another Kubota tractor? You know what I mean? It's like when you can buy a kudu. And so going back to this question of saturation, because that's in part what you're asking, is that where does saturation happen? And the answer is, it happened in South Africa. It happened. But the market didn't go away. It just changed. So between 1991, which is when the privatization of wildlife happened in South Africa, and 2018, you saw, I think it was $14.5 billion was invested into the wildlife breeding business in South Africa. There was 50 million acres of marginal farmland that was converted from growing corn and beans to natural habitat that was now growing kudu and sable. So you had this period of whatever that is, 27 years, where they went from roughly a couple 100,000 animals to, in 2018, they had 20 million plus. So a couple 100,000 to 20 million plus. And in 2018, the market flipped and you saw supply outweigh demand. And as the result of that, prices plummeted. They went way down. So you had 27 years of massive growth, and then you saw a flip in the industry and the prices went down. And during that time frame, you had COVID happen right after that. So you had all these landowners that had tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of animals out there, and there was no economic value because people weren't hunting during COVID. The prices had gone way down. So what do you think they did? Well, they shot them.
They hunted them.
They shot them.
Yeah.
They shot them in mass numbers. They just annihilated them. They shot them in mass numbers and they made biltong out of them. That's what they did. So they went from a few 100,000 to 20 plus million. COVID hits and they go out and they depopulate because the economic value had gone away. And by virtue of doing that, they reduced the population and therefore the market has started to come back. So if you look over the last couple of years in Africa, the prices have been coming back and getting higher and higher and higher. So there's a cyclical component to the market, but the market doesn't go away. And so where are we in the cycle? Well, we have a few 100,000 animals. And that's what we have. We have a few 100,000. We don't have millions of animals. We're nowhere near 20 million. So where in the cycle are we? Well, we're very early in the cycle.
Yeah.
What we have seen over the last, call it year or 2 years, is we've seen a decline in price. I'm applauding it. Like, I'm thankful for it. We were seeing 40 and 50 and 60 and 100% appreciation on values in animals every year over the last 8 years. That is not healthy for a market.
Yeah.
It's really bad. It's not good for a market. So the fact that we've seen a slight decline on, let's just say, more than 50% of the species over the last year, to me is great. We've reached a floor. There's been stabilization. We're not still in decline. Lots of species are still extremely valuable. They went down a little bit, not much. Others went down some, but not a ton. So the fact that we've seen a peak and then we've seen a valley and we've reached stability in the market, I think it really demonstrates that there's still tremendous growth in the industry. There's still tremendous opportunity within the industry. And I don't think we're anywhere near saturation. But again, as long as people have the ability to use these animals to get tax incentives, and they're making money every year, and they need tax incentives, they're going to keep buying them.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and as long as they can take the business that they've created around exotic wildlife and use it to improve real estate that would otherwise just be a vacation property, this model works really well, even if the animals don't make money. If all you're doing is breaking even on the animals, but you're increasing the value of your real estate with after-tax money, you're still making money. It's still a tremendous benefit. And so our risk, like all other industries, is regulatory risk. It's government regulation is the single biggest risk facing every industry under the sun. Under this new administration coming into the Trump administration, we will most likely see regulation reduced, if history proves anything. But if for some reason our tax incentives were to go away, or the ability to depreciate business assets were to go away, or there was some restriction placed on improving real estate that's part of a business tied to exotic wildlife were to go away, I think it would affect our industry tremendously. I think it would hurt. But there's no evidence that that's anywhere even on the forefront. There's no evidence that that's even a possibility. And so I think we have a really bright future. I think there's a lot of runway in front of us, and I think we have a long ways to go in our market, both in the land conservation and in the animal world. So it's a pretty exciting time to be a part of this.
Yeah, definitely. Especially the land conservation is just kind of just getting going. Right. So it's going to be like pretty huge.
Yeah. One other thing just I guess I'd like to note is when you look at our company, we're very unique in the industry. It's surprising to me today that others have not copied our model. Really, it's surprising.
Yeah.
We started out in 2016 with basically 3 people, and we owned 270 acres, and we were leasing about 1,200 at the time. And today, we have plus or minus 100 people working within our company. We've accumulated like $120 million of assets. Our revenue this year will be about $60 million. And the evidence of this industry is demonstrated by our company. Our company, if you just look at black and white numbers and you just look at the growth of people, assets, revenue, and real estate over the last 8 years, it is impossible to say that the exotic wildlife industry is not a great place to deploy capital. It would be impossible to say that. There's no other place I can go where I can get the return on investment that we've been able to get in the exotic wildlife industry. There's nowhere else I can go. I mean, maybe Bitcoin, but the problem is it's all over the place. You never know what's going to happen. The stability that we've seen in our industry, even with the slight decline in prices that we've seen, there's no better place to deploy capital. It's real estate, it's hard assets, it's cool assets, and it's got all sorts of tax incentives. So it's just, if someone really wants to get a clear perspective of what this industry is, just look at our company. We have 2,500 registered bidders on our website. We have more than 1,000 customers that we work with just here in the state. We have hundreds of investors from all over the United States that invest in these partnerships. It's like this picture is demonstrative of an industry as a whole. And it's not hard to see what's going on if you just take a little closer look at what you thought was maybe a pyramid or a Ponzi or a scam.
Cartel.
When you
cartel.
well, look, when you really get down to brass tacks, ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
You know, but when you start going and looking into this, and honestly, the only people that take the time to do that are people that have the capital to go do it themselves.
Yeah.
The people that don't have the capital to do it, they just keep talking. You know, they just keep saying whatever they're going to say. But people that are smart, people that have business acumen, people that want to capture these benefits, they do take the time to look. And when they do, they jump in with both feet. We don't get told no often.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the easiest thing I've ever sold in my life.
Well, it's like, do you want to pay Uncle Sam, or do you want to pay and have cool animals, improvements on your ranch, tax write-offs? I mean, like, is that a question?
Yeah, it's we don't get told no often.
Right.
We really don't. I mean, it's just, if someone has the resources and they have the personality to be able to handle the risk, and there's any ego at all where there's some bragging rights, this is just kind of a no-brainer. No, it's really, the industry speaks for itself. I mean, I'm happy to speak for the industry, but the industry speaks for itself.
Yeah.